Welcome to the Modern Hippie podcast, where we'll be exploring all of my favorite boundary-pushing people and topics surrounding consciousness, psychedelics, mental performance, functional medicine, living in alignment, and so much more. I'm your host, Barrett Perlman, a former pro wakeboarder turned body worker, energy healer, and well, a modern hippie. And I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the Modern Hippie podcast. I am joined today by my dear friend, Hamilton Souther, who is the most incredible shaman in the world. He's a visionary and author, founder of Blue Morpho Ayahuasca, Blue Morpho Academy. What else do you do? NFTs, stocks, you make art. You're just a man of so many talents. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for being here, Barrett. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah. So we just got done with another ayahuasca retreat in the Amazon.
Indeed. How was it?
It was really different from my first one with you.
How so?
I'm willing to identify that, like, you know, it's a plant medicine. And as much as I'm a psychonaut and I love to go extremely deep in the medicine, there's oftentimes a different lesson that needs to come through. And so I had set my overall retreat intentions of desiring to learn more from you about, you know, large group space holding, and also to acquire some tools that I could take home from my own practice of healing and facilitation, and to call upon some guides to use. And it was interesting to me that before I dive into like each ceremony, but those things were coming to the forefront as coming true and not even in ceremony. I was really learning things from you outside of ceremony that were fulfilling that. And so then instead, I was getting these tough lessons from Mother Ayahuasca.
Well, Mother Ayahuasca has been known to dish some pretty tough lessons.
Yeah. Let's start though. Let's take it back real quick for any of my listeners who are not familiar with ayahuasca.
Sure.
What is ayahuasca?
Ayahuasca is a plant medicine. It's a combination of a number of plants. The vine that's called ayahuasca stands for vine of the soul. And scientific name is Banisteriopsis caapi. It's a vine that grows in the Amazon. And it's the fundamental plant that then goes by the name ayahuasca, but it's really a combination of plants. It's a plant tea. It's a pretty elaborate tea. The basic recipe is the ayahuasca vine and the leaves of the chacruna tree. And the chacruna tree is a relative of the coffee family, and it has visionary properties associated with it. And so you make it by combining the ayahuasca vine with the leaf. And then there are certain cultures that have a number of different admixtures that are added to it. And they could have anywhere from 3 to 15 different kinds of plants that are also added to the ayahuasca.
And so it's a beautiful, I find it's got so many different modalities to it. Like you can really embrace it as a beautiful healing plant. I know traditionally they use it to help prevent people from sitting in trauma, whether it's physical trauma or psychological trauma that's happened. And, you know, Westerners, we love to go to it to help us heal from our journeys in life thus far, to help us heal physical ailments. And then there's sort of the people who love to use it as a shamanic tool for exploring different dimensions and galaxies and alien races. And then there's the psychonauts, which I also fall into the category of, who just love to go full send deep and see what's there and take that information back. And what I love about your ceremonies and the way that you hold space is you allow for all of that in the same ceremony. So like we had people there healing from deep chronic illnesses, physical illnesses.
Sure.
We had people there healing from, you know, their mental baggage and psychological baggage. And then we had, you know, people like me who are like, I want to see the energy lines and I want to hang out with the aliens. And I've got all this work I want to do deep in the depths and bring the knowledge back. And so specifically on the retreat, I mostly got denied that space. And that was a really hard lesson for me to sit with, because I last went on a retreat with you in October.
Sure.
And so ever since the day I left, I've been planning to come back for this January retreat. And so I've literally been like counting down the days that I can go deeper into DMT than I can figure out how to get to by myself.
Yeah.
And so then it was kind of like by ceremony night 3, I was like just trying not to sit in the disappointment of being denied access to that space.
Yeah.
And identifying that there were these other really important lessons coming through.
True.
And especially like for me, the first night, my medicine over an hour and a half, like didn't kick in. And I sort of came up to you at one point. I was like, Hamilton, on a scale of like 0 to full send, I'm at like a 0, like 0 visions. And you were like, just wait. And I was like, okay. And then about 20 or 30 minutes later, you offered up a second cup. So I came up and I was like, I might be approaching a 1 by now, but I'm still kind of at a 0. And so you're like, all right, we'll give you more, fine. And that was a very important lesson for me, that ceremony, about just what an incredible maestro you are. And I now am in love with that title for you, because it's like a conductor also of an orchestra. And to me, that's exactly what you're doing up there, is you are completely conducting the orchestra of everyone in the room in a beautiful symphonic way. And it occurred to me that night for the first time that my journey, my trip, wasn't allowed to come up because there were other people in the room having a really hard time. And their journey was so loud that it was not ideal for you to bring up my instrument, essentially.
Yeah, well, I mean, you go into ceremony, and like you say, we have a lot of different people for different reasons. And you're balancing the energies between everybody in the room. And a longer onset of the experience can take place for a number of different reasons. But it also can be because we're going to go really slow into the nature of that experience and have to be really patient. And it gives you an opportunity to learn an understanding of patience and an interaction with the plant medicine themselves. So Westerners like to treat consuming plants in the form of like, I'm taking this substance, and this substance should be a measurable phenomena, that if I take a certain amount, it should have some kind of effect. And if I take more, it should have a stronger effect. And if I take even more, it should have a stronger effect. And that's fundamentally just not the way ayahuasca works. It just does not work that way. And it's really a relationship that you have with the plant, and you're asking something from the plant. And the plant is in the Amazon known as being truly conscious. And depending on how it's treated and depending on where you're coming from, it'll teach different lessons based off of how much it is sharing with you and how much it isn't sharing with you. How much is the sort of psychedelic visionary experience versus how much is sitting with the plant in a very deep communion with really none of that whatsoever. And it depends on the precedence of the intentions that you set, how the plant is going to relate to those intentions and what it's going to teach you. For instance, like if you're sitting there and you have the intention of learning more about holding a group, right? Literally holding a group means nothing about your own experience, like literally nothing. Your experience does not actually get to come into play in terms of holding a group. Your responsibility is entirely to the group. And so you moderate your experience for the group. And that requires learning the lessons of patience, compassion, truly being there for others, and a surrender of the ego that makes that real, not only for yourself, but for everybody else in the room. You can also have experience where learning that if you drink a lot of ayahuasca and you're learning how to hold space for a group, you actually have much less experience because you drank so much ayahuasca that if you do go really big, you won't be able to be there for the group. Like you'll go so into your own experience that you can't stay present. And so it'll teach you how to stay fully present with very little effects, even though you have a dose in your mind that just makes absolutely no sense of why you would have that experience.
Yeah, that's similar to how I dose myself for psilocybin ceremonies as well. Like I know that I probably could function at even larger doses and hold ceremony, but it doesn't feel responsible to me. Yeah. And I sort of tap out around like 3 grams of mushrooms to put me deep in that space where I'm still very present and tapped into that energy. But yeah, so that was my really profound lesson on the first ceremony.
Beautiful.
And I, the next day was like, shit, that was exactly what you wanted to learn while you were here this time. Okay, well, check. And then we went into ceremony number 2. So we do 4 ceremonies over 5 days on this retreat. And ceremony 2 was like, I think even more turned down for me than ceremony 1. And so I was kind of like really being denied access to this space. And so then I had to step back and reflect on why. And more of what came up was that now I'm holding expectations going into the space. And now I'm insisting that I want to go and be a psychonaut and explore all these alien races and things, and mind your manners. So a deeper respect for the medicine was sort of requested. And so then we had a day off, which was good. And then the third ceremony, I probably should have looked back at my notes before we did this, but it was like there was so little happening.
You created a plan, though. You had a plan.
Yeah.
And you had a certain number of cups that you were going to drink.
For the third night.
Yeah.
Yeah. For the third night, I decided I was going to take 3 cups because I wouldn't have to leave early the next day. Like, I feel like when we leave on Saturday, it's just, I'm not ready to go. And if I haven't slept much, it's just really hard. So I was like, okay, Thursday night, I really want to sit in the medicine as long as possible, almost like a hard training tool, like the day you have to go out and run 10 miles and you don't want to, but you're there to train. And I had my 2 cups in ceremony, and they were just really tough. Like, I was really struggling with a lot of nausea. I wasn't going very deep. I didn't feel well the whole time. And we sort of, you turn the candles on, and which is sort of the sign that ceremony is beginning to slow down, and we're coming out of holding that really transformational space. And I sort of asked you, I was like, I've got this 3rd cup you poured me. Like, I don't want to take it. Should I take it? And you were like, well, save it. And I was like, could I take it back in my room later? And you were like, yeah, you could do that. Yeah. And so what really drove me then was to take it back to my room. And I was like, oh my gosh, I could take this cup now and I don't have to hold space for anybody. And I could even be a responsible adult on ayahuasca and like go jump in the pool and like, maybe walk around and experience outside on ayahuasca, which I've never done. Not recommended for most people, but I was like, I'll be fine. And I took that cup in my room. It took about 45 minutes to kind of kick in. And it was the mildest experience I've ever had on ayahuasca. And it only lasted about 40 minutes.
Amazing.
Yeah. So it was definitely like ayahuasca being like, nope, you didn't need it. You just, what are you doing? Silly fool. And then the next day I came out of it and I was like, I came to you and I was like, Hamilton, I'm really trying not to sit in disappointment about how my ceremonies are going, but I don't know what to do. And you were like, I think there's a really important lesson here, Barrett, that you're not paying attention to.
Yeah.
And I kind of had like a full meltdown that day. During the day. Like, I just started crying. And I felt so misaligned from my path. I felt the walls of my entire support of who I was, the house that I've built around who I am, just started to come crumbling down. And I was racing around mentally trying to fortify the walls, but just sitting in my room and like sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And finally came up with, you had said maybe you need to sit deeply with ayahuasca, like lose the idea of going deep into DMT land and sit with the spirit of the vine. Yeah. And I said, okay, that aligns with what I set my retreat intentions to be. Yeah. And so I came into ceremony prepared then that I was not going to have a deep experience, that I was going to get a lot of the vine, and that I was going to spend my time deeply in meditation, just trying to figure out what ayahuasca wanted to tell me. And I was completely surrendered to the idea of like, ayahuasca kicked my ass this time and I didn't get what I wanted. And that's okay. And so you poured me a very special cup of your breakthrough formula.
I did.
How would you describe your breakthrough formula?
It's a combination of elements that are just really powerful. They help open you when you feel blocked. And it's designed to give you every opportunity to both have that deep conversation with ayahuasca, align the relationship that's being formed and developed, and also have an opportunity to have visions.
Well, it did that. So you have 4 different formulas you use in ceremony?
Yeah, when I take on a retreat, I now take 4 different kinds of ayahuasca.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you mixed at least 3 in there. So
I did.
There was like some breakthrough, some Aya Light, some Chacruna, which is just like straight DMT.
Yeah, there was some of our original recipe as well.
Okay.
Yep.
And so I received this cup and I was just like, I'm familiar with what the breakthrough formula was designed for. And I'm going to just sit in pure ayahuasca and surrender and just be excited about having a mild experience. And so the first half of the ceremony was actually quite mild for me. You had invited the Buddhas to join us that night. I actually saw the bunch of the Buddhas floating around. So I was shocked that I saw anything because all week people were seeing things and I was like, nothing. And then I saw one of my spirit animals is the tiger. The tiger kind of came to me and gave some strength. And I was like, oh, I love seeing you here. Thank you. I tried calling on some things that didn't come, like the Arcturians and Papatua, still waiting for him to reveal himself to me. He's the spirit of the spirits. And then just sort of rejoined ceremony. You had some really beautiful times where you're drumming and singing about love and infinity and then kind of doing like a whole talk out at everyone about, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a talk, but it's not. It's like you're writing programming in our brains about healing and love and releasing into the universe and being embraced and being safe and being held. And then I kind of laid back down. And I mean, I was on a scale of 0 to 10, I was probably at like a 4 most of the time, 3 to 4. Mm-hmm. And I laid back down and I had purged once. And then I just start feeling it ramping up. And in a matter of about 10 minutes, I went from a 4 to like an 11. And I was like, holy shit balls. I'm tripping my face off. How did this happen? and I got to sit with Mother Ayahuasca. Mm-hmm. And she didn't have like much to say except that she took me deeply into the plants. And she took me deeply into a tree. And she showed me how slowly things were created. And I got to watch just little by little as things grew and have that really slow pace with her, mm-hmm. which felt like a beautiful message of how my whole retreat had been going. Mm-hmm. And, but yeah, then I started tripping balls. And I was actually concerned I was going to be tripping for days because it was so deep and so intense, which I thought might sound cool. But then it was this really beautiful space that I had been wanting to get to most of the time. And then the aliens came and visited me again. This cool little like fluttering species that's made out of like neon violet light with this white glow around it that just flutters and says hello. And a couple different, species came and I was like, oh, well, thank you for this gift of finally like the night that I had been hoping for. Like, thank you for sending me off with this, just like one really deeply satisfying, insane trip. And got to go into like where it feels like pure creationism, mm-hmm. where it's this really bright, multicolored light creating these beautiful designs. And as I sit in it, I can think about something that I want to create and watch as it's birthed into an idea that I would have never come up with on my own. Like I have a podcast idea that I want to do specifically around psychonautics, just like one pure episode. And it came to me how I would like to really film it outside the box and like change the cover art for it. And I was like, well, it's not aligned. It's not going to be the same as, I was like, it's my fucking podcast. You do whatever the fuck I want. Like there's no rules. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh yeah, I can. Like I could really embrace more creativity around this stuff. And explored some relationships and some conversations then in those relationships. And Yeah, it was a really nice end piece on the whole retreat for me, of having this grandiose lesson in patience with the plant medicine, not being so demanding of the experience that you want to have. And yeah. How was the retreat for you?
Oh, the retreat was amazing. It was a really amazing experience. Yeah. I think important lessons to understand with the plant medicines, the first one is patience. And the second one is to not compare it to other kinds of psychedelics. I'm not even sure that plant medicines in the Amazon should be put in the same category. They are visionary. And because certain chemicals are known as psychedelics that are in the plants, they get brought into that same categorization. But there's something more going on. There really is something much deeper going on. And it really is relationship oriented. And the indigenous people say that it's all about the relationship, not about the dose. It's 100% about the relationship. And I think that's a very important lesson. We come with a certain kind of desire and a certain kind of demand of the experience itself. And the ayahuasca reserves a right, literally in the spirit of it, to not grant somebody literally anything. And there are people that do come to the Amazon to have the experience and leave saying they had absolutely nothing happen. It doesn't really happen at Blue Morpho, but it happens in other places. And so it is possible. And so I think that lesson around patience and expectation is really important. The lesson of relationship is really, really important. And also, it's important to understand that certain things that we're asking for may not happen in the linear progression that we have preconceived about the experience. Like, if I want something from the plants, typically we do. We want healing, or we want some kind of transformation or awakening, or we want visions, or we want to meet some kinds of beings or spirits, or have interactions with entities and things like that. If I want to have that experience, I have to ask myself, what has to change inside me so that I can have that experience? I can't assume that I'm in the appropriate condition, mentally, emotionally, physically, or energetically / spiritually, to immediately have that experience. So something in me may have to change. And that thing that may have to change in me may take a very long time to change. It may take days to change. It may take weeks. It may take months. It may take years. So I think that's really important to understand, that you're looking to have a relationship with a certain kind of plant medicine, and that really starts in the nature of the relationship. And if you thought about the plant medicine like the way you would think about asking something from another human, you might approach it differently in terms of how you would go about the nature of that interaction and whatever demands that you would have of that being. And I think that we often don't think of it that way because we think it's like an inert tea. It's this tea and I'm going to drink it and it's going to create some kind of experience for me. But really the way the Amazonian people treat it is that you're talking to something that's sentient and something that's conscious. And the drinking of the tea itself is only one very important but minor aspect of the total relationship that's potentially available. So I just think that's really important. And when somebody, not you specifically, but just anybody comes to the plant medicine, we're asking something of the plant, and we need to understand what needs to change within us. This happens a lot with people who want to learn, right? They want to have apprenticeship. They hear about this idea of apprenticeship, and they have this idea, this expectation of what it might be like to learn from the plants. And they really need to ask themselves, like, what about me right now is not a master shaman? What about me right now is not a master medico vegetalista? Where all the other medico vegetalistas that are alive and all the other ones that are ancestors that have passed on would recognize you within that capacity and say, yeah, we all recognize you as now being one of us in this space, right? If you ask yourself that question, there's going to be lots and lots of answers of the difference between someone who's gone through that training and someone who hasn't, right? No different than someone who says, I want to go to law school, and somebody who is not only a lawyer, but a super accomplished lawyer, or some other kind of professional like a surgeon, somebody who needs to, they're not even pre-med yet, and they want to go to med school, and then they want to go and learn a specialty and then do a residency. And it's very much the same in the Amazon. A traditional apprenticeship is typically anywhere to get to just a baseline, 5 to 10 years. And then they say you start a maturation phase. So just to get to like graduation, and imagine that like graduating high school is 5 to 10 years. Then they say, okay, now you're going to start your maturation phase, and that's indeterminate length. Could be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years more of just maturing in time to get to that point that you really feel like you have that mastery over the practice. So if you think about 15 or 20 years of practice, how much is going to change within you from the time that you start? Those are all the things and lessons that you're going to have to go through with the plants during the time of that training. And I think that can help frame sometimes the experiences that we have. I can be very intense and really don't align with what we would potentially expect from the experience itself.
Super well said. Yeah. And I can absolutely see that happening because I went there to learn something. You know, I desire to learn from you, to how to shaman, to facilitate, to grow my strength in that area. And so, walking away with those lessons of being kind of not bitch slapped by the medicine, but like, I was showing up making demands, and she was sort of like, no, how about no, go rethink and come back, stop being a spoiled little brat, and come back. And, but then I was learning outside of the medicine. And I was actually getting some training in my dreams as well. Like one night, I was paddling in a really flat water. I wasn't surfing because obviously there would have been waves, but somewhere really flat. And these two dolphins came up and were swimming with me, which dolphins are one of my other spirit animals. And so I got to like pet and play with some of them real quick. But then here came an alligator. And the alligator comes swimming like right up to me, and its intentions are clearly to eat me. And I was like, oh shit, I'm literally in a bikini on a big board in the water. What do I have? And I went, I'm going to have to explode this thing with light. And so I reached out and I put my hand on its like snout, and I started willing to burst it with light. And there was something that you had said early on in our retreat, which was that shamanic battles are a battle of doubts, a battle of creating doubt within the other. And essentially whoever has the least amount of doubt kind of is the winner. And I was sort of went into this training with it of, I started to doubt that I could do it. And I was like, okay, well, if on a scale of, doubt to 100% no doubt, where am I? I was like, I'm at 70%. And so it was like, I was like, but it's life or death. How do I now get rid of the doubt? And I got to sit in the experience of essentially coming up with now a doubt override switch. Like I have a fear override switch, which I've used often in action sports and situations where I was pretty sure I was going to die and didn't, that I have the ability to turn that on. And so now I was like, okay, let's turn on doubt override and feel what it feels like to have zero doubt that this is going to work. And eventually I got there and the alligator exploded. And I was like, cool. What a fun training. And I really love that concept of doubt really makes you strong as a shaman and walking in that space, even just on your own journeys, like the lack of doubt. We did have a request. I took a bunch of listener submitted questions to ask you today. It's a little lengthy, all right, but we'll get there. So that kind of sort of brings me to some more cosmic shaman battle stories.
All right.
Do you have any talk about them? Any good ones you can share? Any recent ones?
Cosmic shaman battle stories?
Yeah. Did you battle at all in our retreat?
No.
Oh, bummer. I mean, I guess that's good. Someone didn't need a full-on battle.
It doesn't happen very often. No, we did have a guest though that had some magic stuff happen, which is pretty interesting. So, there was a guest that had a connection to a ex in a relationship, and the ex was doing certain kinds of magic spells and just kind of psychically harassing her. And she asked to have those removed. And that was really interesting because that was part of the third night. And you mentioned there being an experience of like everything feeling like it's being turned off. And the room got pretty heavy and it got kind of dark. And not dark like people seeing dark stuff, like dark, literally darkness.
Zero light.
Yeah, like zero light. Like there were no stars. There was like, it was dark in the room.
Super dark.
Yeah, like looking around going, wow, the room's really dark. And what we were removing was black magic. And that's black. And the whole room looked black, and we were removing those energies. And when you specifically remove magics from a space, they're very distortive of people's experience. And they can make everything look like opposites. So you can feel like your guides aren't there when they're actually there helping you remove the magic. And 5-10 minutes later, when the magic goes, it's like a veil's unlifted and all the guides are there. But for that period of time, you can feel completely abandoned. You can feel like there's literally no light in the room when the light is completely on in the room, but you just feel like there's none. Feel like it's vacuous, and you're like, where did all this medicine spirit energy go? And it's just not there, and you have to like dig really deep within yourself and like really work it to get it going. You can feel completely separated and cut off from the ayahuasca itself. So all those things, I mean, that night had some of that in it, just in terms of cleansing, but it wasn't like there was an antagonism fighting back or anything like that. It's been a long time actually since I've had any kind of like real engagement in that way.
Like, what's one of the toughest negative spirits you went up against?
Well, they come from different mythologies. So, Judeo-Christian mythology, Satan's really a pretty difficult spirit to deal with.
Okay. Can you tell me about going up against Satan?
Well, we used to dance a lot. I mean, it's like, it was pretty common, really. Fundamentally, at the level of healing, like circa 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that period of time, there was just a lot of healing around people's souls that were coming. And so there was always the nature of that presence because they had come from Judeo-Christian mythologies where they had darkness and this issue ultimately with their fear. And when you go all the way in that mythology to the depths of fear, and you go all the way to like as far as you can possibly go around your soul, there's always this question around, Satan and that presence. And so that was really intense. I mean, ultimately, if you think like the magic story I just tell about things seeming like opposites, it's like everything goes haywire. Just absolutely everything in the journey goes haywire. And you have to navigate it with knowledge. It's very difficult. And there's a tremendous cost associated with it to you personally. But ultimately, love triumphs. And so, there's typically this tremendous push or pull that takes place for a long period of time. It can go on for hour after hour after hour after hour to finally be able to wrestle within that person, their own soul, and feel like their own soul is really seated in their own body. And it isn't in this flux of like light and dark and fear and doubt and stuff anymore. In terms of the actual shamans themselves, shamans use spirits. And so one time, this is fun. I mean, one time I was in this astral sorcery battle, which was really quite interesting. And what makes it astral is that you're dealing with astral elements and you're in outer space in your vision. So you get transported into outer space in your vision. You're in outer space. And, there are other kinds of beings that are out there. And some are watching and some are part of it. But there was this one guy who managed planets. And he was actually able to hurl planets. And so like we were in this battle and he was like throwing these planets literally at me. And I was dodging them like Mercury goes flying by my head, and then
How far do you have to dodge to get out of the way of Mercury?
Well, you're pretty in those space. You're pretty big, and the planets can be pretty small.
Okay.
But you got to dodge pretty hard. I mean, they come fast. Don't get me wrong. Like it's like you have a split second to know what you're doing, or you're gonna like lose your head. So and so then he threw Saturn at me, and what was most interesting about it was I didn't really have a grasp of like the way that we're affected by planets. I mean, I know from astrology, there's lots of different ways that people map it and talk about it and share that, there's different mental effects and stuff like that. But after this guy threw these planets at me, I realized he had actually thrown my planets, like the spirit of my like the ones that related to Hamilton and the birth chart. I mean, we all share them, but they were like the ones that I was connected to psychologically in that moment. And I couldn't think. So it was like he had distorted this cosmology around me, and it removed my ability to have any kind of coherent thought. And I thought that was really interesting. And it gave a lot of credibility in my understanding to astrology and the effects that the planets had on the mind. And so I had to actually go retrieve the planets, and I had to go put them back in place in like appropriate location and orbit. And then my mind turned back on and I could think like relatively normally again. And so that was really quite an interesting thing. So in the middle of the battle, I had to like stall the battle, fake the guy out, get him to run, go grab the planets, get them back in place. And then actually I was like, oh, mine's working again. And then I was able to get super creative and, ultimately sort of win that engagement. And that was quite an interesting time.
I bet it'd be like, if you could, I could imagine like playing with a kid and watching them knock down like all of your mom's like plants or something, and then being like, shit, I can't even chase you now until I put my mom's plants back because she's gonna be super pissed.
Totally. That's exactly what it was like.
Oh, wow. What an interesting time. And when you were coming up as a shaman, like, did your mentors help you in those battles, or were they just like, good luck and let us know if you're dying?
No, very early on. The lineage that I got accepted into was a lineage that healed the work of dark arts practitioners. So they were already engaged in an unbelievable number of battles. Like, they had upset a lot of other people that get paid to do this kind of work. And so the other people's reputations on the line. There's a lot of complexity going on with it. So I just got brought into that lineage, and it was also taboo for a foreigner to be brought in. So it was kind of like getting brought into a gang war that was also incredibly racist at the same time. And so when that took place, I was all of a sudden just cast into the war that they were already involved in, and didn't know that that's what I was getting myself into, didn't know how to protect myself. And so in the early engagements, they would always fight with me and help me just to stay alive. And ultimately, since I didn't know how to protect myself, they would just use me as bait. So they would just literally like put me out, kind of like, the lamb tied to the post. So like, well, we can't stop him from getting hit, so he's just gonna get completely annihilated tonight. And we'll actually like do everything we can to keep him alive. And so that's kind of like how, I don't know, the first 90 to 100 ceremonies went.
Oh my God, what an ass kicking that must have
been. Oh,
been.
dude, it was unbelievably brutal. Yeah, it was really brutal. It was really intense, but it was also very training. It was very, very training. And luckily, because they were skilled, we didn't really lose. So it would be like being in a MMA fight or a boxing fight where you take a lot of punches, but at the end of the fight, you actually win. Like, you would win the skirmish, and then we would spend the last half of the ceremony healing us. And what was really interesting about that is that we went through all these like battle energies, and then we would go through all this medicine energy. And it'd be like the medicine was just waiting for us for that thing to be over. And then that's one of the things that really taught me how to heal, because it taught me how to heal myself. And so I was able to sit in their Ikaros and hear the difference between the Ikaros that were about battle and the Ikaros that were about healing, and really understand how the different trees that had just been used for battle were now being used for healing. And really how these different animal spirits were now being used for healing. And then really about how these nature spirits were being used, and water was being used, and all these mythological beings that they believe in and know were being used all for healing purposes. And so it was, a really good juxtaposition during that time, real acceleration on development, but also very, very difficult.
So that's kind of a good segue for me, in that I have been learning from you, I've been getting some coaching from you, but you are getting ready to launch Blue Morpho Academy, where anyone can begin to learn from you. Can you tell me a bit about that program?
Yeah, the Blue Morpho Academy is really 20 years in the making. Like, when we started, like I said, it was taboo for people to learn. And over the years, many people have wanted to learn. But for most of us that come from the Western developed worlds, really engaging in a shamanic apprenticeship isn't really practical. It takes years and years. You have to live in the jungle the whole time. There isn't really any standardization of teaching. There's, this kind of tremendous failure rate for people that have tried. And so over the years, we wanted to do something much better than that for everyone. And so we've created the Blue Morpho Academy, which is a way for anyone who's interested in being a sitter, a coach, a facilitator, or a master facilitator to be able to go through both online education, to be able to share a standardization of information that really allows us as a community and as people being certified to have an incredible foundation and baseline of all the information they need to know, and then also in-person experiences, in real life experiences to come and work together, learn how to facilitate, learn how to go through dieta, learn how to work with different kinds of plants. And the Academy is going to start offering a foundations course and a specialization in ayahuasca, psilocybin, San Pedro Huachuma, and cannabis. And so you'll be able to learn a foundation, have a community that supports you, really learn how to have your own practice or business in this space, be able to join the psychedelic renaissance that's happening, and really learn from us to accelerate your growth and development. So, you can learn everything that took us 2 decades to learn. You can learn in a much shorter period of time, learn really the best of the best, and, join us in this really incredible opportunity to learn about the plants.
Hell yeah. And what I'm so grateful for about your program is that like you went and suffered to receive all this information, and just like your heart is so kind and your generosity is so huge that you just love to share this information with anyone who wants to show up and learn it. And
I think it's really important now. The lineages are all siloed, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. And a lot of the information is practical sense that's being kind of messed with just by other means of people's beliefs and ideologies and stuff. And I feel like it's time to really create a legitimate foundation of information that we can all share in and understand, and also have personal experience that adds validity to the nature of that information, and that's just going to be really healthy for the community.
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited to deepen my practice with you and get going on Blue Morpho Academy. And I'm also really excited that you're going to be opening up a space to do dietas. What are some of the what would you say are like the top 3 dietas that tend to behoove someone getting started first?
First, dieta is a process of purification, right? And it's a very meditative, very calming, very centering practice. It's typically not so psychedelic. You learn from the dieta by bringing the plants into you, and then the plants teach you from the inside out. And a lot of it takes place in dream state. And it also is incredible for really deep healing, like tremendous, tremendous healing, including physical illnesses get transformed through dieta, psychological, psychosomatic transformation takes place. And it's also really one of the core practices to how we learn plant medicine. And so I think dieta is a cornerstone of the practice, and it's very transformative on just a personal level, but then also when you take it afterwards, after you've gone through dieta into the other psychedelic experiences, you'll see how much you've transformed from that experience. I think we start with trees. The tree dietas is really where we start. And there are a number of different plants that aren't just trees that get invited into that. And you can start with 1, 2, 3, 4 trees in a dieta is a good place. You get to meet the trees that way. It's a real interesting concept that they figured out in the Amazon that ultimately now is our ideas of information technology, that you can download essence. You can download information. Like, we download from servers into our phones. Well, they figured out you can download from trees into your body.
Cool.
And they figured this out thousands of years ago, which is like unbelievably phenomenal.
It's like the first internet.
Exactly. No, it is. And the trees have this amazing amount of knowledge, strength, strength of spirit, medicine within them. And so, start with some tree dietas, and then we can move from that to Sanango dietas, crystal dietas, and other kinds of plants. We'll do different kinds of floral dietas. And then we'll also have programs to, once you learn how to do dieta, to be able to do dieta with your own plants that are indigenous to your, wherever you live, so that you can connect with the plants wherever you live, especially the different kinds of medicinal plants. And we can use dieta as this way of downloading from the plant itself into the body and then bringing that into our practice.
Cool. Yeah, I'm super excited about crystals as well, because I'm just such a sick freak for crystals. I love them. I love their energy. There's so many powerful crystals around all the time. And now that you tell me I could put them in my body and download their knowledge, I'm like, what would happen if we did like Lemurian quartz? Like, they literally programmed them with ancient information. I mean, I hope someone out there's done it already. If you have, get at me. Tell me how it was.
Well, it's going to come into the body, and we're going to tap into that ancient information, and then we're going to take it into ceremony, and we're going to see that information come to life within our consciousness, and then ultimately get to share it.
Can't wait. Super can't wait. Okay, let me dive into some more of these questions. This one's from Blanca. When did you know you were supposed to be a shaman?
Oh, really? I figured out I was supposed to be a shaman after I had really a traditional shamanic awakening. I had a traditional calling in my early 20s. And I was trying to figure out what was happening to me because there was very little information out there that was, mainstream about this. And so I actually, through a number of synchronistic events, turned to shamanism as a way to try to see if I could explain what was actually happening. And shamanism explained everything that was happening. It was basically a traditional calling.
What's a traditional calling? What's an example of a traditional calling?
You start having visions.
Okay.
You start having prophetic dreams. You start having just shifts in consciousness randomly that you have no control over. You start potentially seeing other kinds of energies or interacting with other kinds of entities or beings. Typically synchronistic events start to happen around that, and other people that are guides show up and start having, unique interaction with you that isn't common. Like in my case, a lady came to me and she just looks at me and I just met her and she goes, "How are you sleeping?" Like, no one asked me that, just like randomly. And I'm like, "Not really well." And she's like, "Oh, I know, I'm supposed to give you a book." And she hands me this book. And so I start opening the book, I start to read the book, and it's about another shaman that in his early 20s had an awakening just like mine. It was like that. And so then all of a sudden now I have a story that goes along with what had been happening. And so that was the calling to shamanism. And I didn't know what, specific type of shamanism I'd be involved with. I didn't know it would have plant medicines involved in it at all. There are lots of kinds of shamanic practices that don't have that. They're just ecstatic, and you connect to spirit and different kinds of energies that way. So I was just guided to go to Peru and try to fulfill the nature of that calling. And then I ultimately learned the hardest part of a calling, which isn't getting the calling itself, it's actually living it out. So the calling was easy, and then finding the apprenticeship was its own challenge, but then actually doing the apprenticeship was the hardest challenge.
And you were the first Westerner to be initiated into shamanism, like a local indigenous.
Like fully accepted, fully embraced, as if, had crossed that barrier into the blood lineages, and permitted to really train.
Would you tell me they called you Blanco Shaman?
Shaman Blanco, yeah. I had sort of two names that they had given me just in the community. It was Shaman Blanco or mostly Shaman Blanco.
I love you sort of shared with me that you'd be like getting on a boat to cross over to somewhere, and people wouldn't know that you were Shaman Blanco, and you'd hear them talking about Shaman Blanco.
Oh yeah, for sure. It was amazing. During that time, I traveled on the rivers a lot on these big river boats, and there was this. It was a big deal. It was a big deal that we were out doing what we were doing, and that there was a foreigner that was part of it, and that lots of people were being healed. And gossip travels really fast through the Amazon. You'd think it wouldn't, but
they're sending it through the trees.
It travels really fast. And so as soon as there were reports of these incredible healings that were taking place that I was part of, the fact that I was part of it was like big news. So it wasn't just that, these like random kind of healings were taking place. Lots of amazing, miraculous healings were taking place. And the fact that a foreigner was part of that was a really big deal to the locals at that time.
Well, another thing that's a really big deal to me about you that I honor so much is that you were really instrumental in working with the government of Peru to, I don't think it's legal, but like decriminalize and allow for the practice of ayahuasca ceremonies here. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, it wasn't so much a shift in the legislation. The legislation had the protection through indigenous rights laws and natural medicine and cultural heritage laws to be able to allow the practices. But no one had ever come in and actually shared the practices and the traditional medicine in a fully focused way on them. So tourists would come, and there was a center in the Tarapoto area that focused on drug addiction. But centers truly dedicated to plant medicine didn't exist when I got here. And so to have that, really come to the forefront of the understanding of the government, they wanted to understand it. They wanted to study it. They wanted to look at it. They wanted to see if it was something that'd be positive or negative for their society. And I actually got to help consult and advise and use Blue Morpho as a model for what a safe and professional center could be. And that was really a tremendous honor. Yeah.
I thank you so much for doing that.
You're very
Thank
welcome.
you for creating what we're able to just hop on a plane and come here and do now without thinking so much about it.
Yeah, it's been fully embraced by the local government and the national government as an extension of their tourism industry. And there's also a tremendous respect for traditional medicine that, has really supported that movement in Peru over the last 20 years.
Well, speaking of Peru, I mean, we're here and the country's in quite a bit of political unrest right now. How are you seeing that affect the ability for people to come to ceremony? How are you seeing it affect the country?
I mean, the effect on the country it's a kind of disrupt, and it's sad in its own right that it's happening, but there's always a lot of political instability, period, here. And so it's kind of expected. It comes in cycles at different times. In terms of coming to have ceremony, there's nothing to be worried about. Literally nothing. Like what you see on the news is highlight reels of propaganda to really make it look like the whole country is going through this. It's not. It's really not. There are these very brief moments of some antagonistic energies and disrupt and protests and things like that. But if you go to Lima and then from Lima to Iquitos where we are, you won't really see any of it. It's business as usual for everybody. And it's completely safe to be able to come here at this time.
Yeah, I traveled here by myself and I've felt completely safe the entire time I've been here. Iquitos has really appeared exactly business as normal to me. Even today, I hopped in a tuk-tuk with one of the guys who seems to always be circulating around the group, who is a local here. And, he took me and a couple other people into the market and then to another market and to another market and then down to the river. And like everything's Iquitos as usual.
Everything is truly Iquitos as usual.
Yeah. Here's a good question. One of my favorites. What is a psychonaut? From Mike.
What is a psychonaut? I think you can answer that better than I am. Barrett is a psychonaut. I think a psychonaut is a person, like an astronaut, explores outer space and explores space and does it in a very specific way. A psychonaut is a person that explores consciousness and explores their existence, really, like the totality of their existence through the use of different kinds of psychedelics or visionary medicines. And the idea is exploration and learning and to interact with different kinds of energies, different kinds of entities, different kinds of beings. And I think you can, as a psychonaut, choose what you're really focused on, and it can change over time.
Yeah, and I would add to that, you don't always get to choose what you're focused on in each one because they do have their own intelligence. Each ceremony, each sitting is completely different from the last. I think one of the things you said to me that hit me the hardest was last retreat, when I had asked you if I had had this incredibly deep experience where I broke through on DMT for the first time and met all these different aliens and ascended masters. And I was like, Hamilton, can I do that again? And you were like, no. And I was like, I can't do that again. You're like, another time. And I was like, I was so gutted. And I was like, you really won't give me another cup? And you're like, oh, I'll give you another cup. If that's what you're asking for. But like the odds of you doing that again, like you can't just do that again. It doesn't happen that way. And it's been something that I've held near and dear because, I keep trying to find that experience too. And I still have yet to re-experience that one, even the breakthrough space in the same way. And I'm like, how do I get there? But yeah, for me, the beauty of psychonautics is I feel this responsibility to go deeper and to understand more because somehow I'm built for it. Somehow there's a warrior inside of me. There's an explorer inside of me. There's a resilient being in this space where so far, knock on wood, I haven't run into anything that has been able to break me in plant medicines and psychedelics. And I can even come out of the most challenging trip of my life and start laughing right away and be like, that really sucked. There's lessons in it. I'll figure that out, but that sucked. And so for me, I feel like every time I go super deep, it's like learning to play basketball, right? Like you got to learn to dribble before you're going to dribble around someone and do some crazy pass. You got to learn to pass between your legs probably before you're going to like run and slam dunk the ball like Michael Jordan. And every time I go deep, I'm getting a little more practice at the dribbling and the passing and the pivot turns and things. And I sort of feel like it was revealed to me in October at our retreat that all of this going there and not knowing what it was for and why, and questioning if I just was like super into drugs, you know, but also knowing that there was so much healing for me that came from that I'm a completely different person with better energy, happiness, and love that didn't show up like that in my life before. And so I love going in and gathering that knowledge. And for me, there's a purpose of needing to share it. And as a facilitator, the more I go in and the deeper I experience, and even the, like for me now, the challenging experiences I have are so that I can relate to someone else's challenging experience. So that when we're doing integration or when I'm holding space for them and they get somewhere, I'm not like, you shouldn't be there. The you shouldn't be there, and I'm using air quotes now, will not be my response. It is the, yes, I totally know what that was like. How can I help that person navigate in the moment away from that? Or how can I help them integrate that and understand it deeper? And then I'm also a crazy psychonaut in the best of ways, that I really am working on tracking down some of these scientists who are beginning the DNT intravenous drip studies. And I feel really compelled to find one and become one of those people who is actually doing literal psychonautic exploring for science.
Amazing.
I mean, I question how many people in the world are actually even built for that.
Probably very few.
Yeah. So, psychonauts, unite. Drew would like to know, what are your best tips and thoughts about releasing fear in ceremony and life in general?
I think fear is pervasive of kind of our culture and society. And so we first have to take responsibility for the fact that we create it. Fear isn't something we store. It's something that we're creating in real time. And so we first have to learn how to just turn it down and then turn it off. And I think the way to do that are relaxation practices. So learning how to breathe and allow energy to flow. I think learning how to turn off fear through meditation or other kinds of spiritual practices probably takes much longer. But in plant medicine practices, it can be much faster because you have the help and the support of the altered state of consciousness that you're going into to learn how to turn it off. And so first there's intention. You ask the plants to be able to help you. And then as you go into the experience, you really work on relaxing and setting that intention to relax. And part of it is relaxing ego. The egoic parts of us are typically parts that are part of creating the fear. And so it's really surrendering that aspect of ego. It's also allowing the heart to balance with the brain mind. The brain mind becomes very fear oriented when it's out of balance with the heart. And so you do a lot of work to open the heart and then allow the heart to naturally balance with the brain mind. And then with that, you find yourself in a balanced state where you're not creating fear.
I wanted to add to that briefly. There was a woman I was working with during our retreat who was struggling to figure out, she just needed a more methodical way to figure out how to turn fear off. She was like, it just doesn't work for me. And one of the things we came up with together was a different sort of mantra or affirmation that to surrender is beautiful. And so rather than focus on what you didn't want, to focus on what it would feel like to not be in fear.
That's
To
beautiful.
surrender is beautiful.
I like that. To surrender is beautiful. Yeah. I don't know what we're holding on to in terms of creating fear. I think the hardest part about it is understanding how to turn something off that we've always had on. And so I like that idea of finding something that is a source of creativity, something that is like a thing that helps us look at it in a new way so that we can start to, make a shift that might be otherwise really difficult.
Me too. Let's see. So Ben wanted to know if you accept apprentices, but I feel like that's kind of covered in your Blue Morpho Academy upcoming.
Yeah, I think that for people who want to become master facilitators, they can look at that as the idea of an apprenticeship and a legitimate apprenticeship. And I think we need to be really honest about what's being offered in terms of apprenticeship in the world and whether or not it really is an apprenticeship or not. I've been hearing a lot of people saying they're going to go apprentice and that they've been accepted to apprentice, and with different indigenous lineages and also just different groups that are offering ayahuasca ceremonies. And they're talking about a 1 month, 2 month thing.
That can't be long enough.
And a real apprenticeship is 5 to 10 years. Full time, 24 hours a day. So I think we need to be really careful out there about what people are calling apprenticeships, and that there's a good chance that they've created something that isn't one. And that they're just offering it to people as a way to pacify them or offer them another kind of longer stay service. But a real apprenticeship is something that takes a very long time and is a true dedication. And in the Blue Morpho Academy, for those who want to go through true apprenticeship to be master facilitators, it's going to be a 4 to 6 year commitment. But it's one that you'll be able to do both abroad and in person.
Cool. How should someone go about seeking an apprenticeship in Shipibo medicine?
Shipibo medicine is a Shipibo nation. The Shipibos are people. They're tribal people that united around a common culture and a common language, and they're the Shipibo nation. And you have to go find different lineages or shamans within the Shipibo nation and get them to accept you. And you have to ask yourself why they would. What do they get out of accepting you and bringing you into their tribe? And to be accepted into their lineage, truly accepted into their lineage, they have to make you a blood relative. So think about that. And if that happens and you really want to become a Shipibo tribal person, and it's even possible, that would be an incredibly, probably difficult and maybe amazing experience. But a true apprenticeship in that space where you really get trained within their lineage would require them to fully accept you.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Mike would like to know, what if you can't hold down the medicine and immediately vomit it out?
If you can't hold down the medicine and you immediately vomit it out, there's something in you that you fundamentally need to purge first. And you need to cleanse and have enough opportunities to be in ceremony to get that out of you. And then if you work with somebody that actually is open and flexible to the idea of adjusting the way that they serve, they could give you the ayahuasca and let you sip it little by little by little by little. And that might be a way to help get it down. So like half a teaspoon at a time every 2 or 3 minutes. So just a small amount, wait, a small amount, wait, a small amount, wait. And if you drink like that so that you're not so impacted by the flavor, I saw the face that you made.
That's tasty.
What you do is you take a breath in, you swallow without breathing. So you take a little bit into your mouth, you fully swallow it, you swallow all the saliva with it so it cleanses the palate, and then you exhale like everything before you actually like let the flavor come up into your nose and into your sinuses, and it makes it much easier to fully process and accept.
That's my tactic. Like, especially when you give me big cups, I inhale, hold my breath, chug it down like it's a shot, which I don't really do shots anymore of alcohol, but I had my days. Chug it down, breathe out through my mouth, breathe in again, rinse my mouth out 3 times with spit, and then finally I'll allow myself to start breathing through my nose again. And even then I make the face of, I love this medicine so much.
It's a strong flavor.
Could you speak to the importance of remineralizing the body after Aya? From Jamie.
I think the importance is just, there's 2 things after ayahuasca you need to do. One is hydrate. You just need to hydrate. And it also depends on the lineage and the nature of the practice, how much fasting there is beforehand. So there are some cultures that have a lot of fasting and a lot of cleansing before they do ayahuasca. And so you're very depleted. And there are others that don't. Like we have a much more gentle approach in that sense. So we just ask you to stop drinking water a half an hour before the ceremony. And, you can even start to drink water really just right after the ceremony. So you're only going 3 or 4 hours without drinking during that time. So you just want to hydrate afterwards and then help the body replenish. And what you're really doing is helping flush the brain to allow the processing of the different alkaloids and the different chemicals that are in the ayahuasca move through the brain so that you can establish, once again, a more balanced brain chemistry.
Are you familiar with it depleting any mineral resources?
No, not specifically.
Okay.
By itself, it doesn't, but that at least that I know of. And it's just the fasting beforehand.
Cool. If a newbie wanted to start a dieta, can they do this on their own or do they need a shaman? From Ben.
Can a newbie do a dieta? You got to learn how to do a dieta, and it helps to have a person at least teach you the process of dieta. And it also helps if they've done dieta, just to help align the plant energies and plant spirits with you. So typically you have someone who's done dieta, who is considered a master shaman, prepare you for the dieta and icaro to the dieta plants that align the intention. But I think that you could sit in a kind of prayer or a kind of deep intention with the plants and really express your true desire for the healing or the learning or transformation that comes through the dieta, and then you could do the dieta. We teach how to do dieta, and so I think that that's probably a really good introduction, and then after that you can continue to do dietas on your own.
Cool. Well, I'm so excited for dietas. I know I keep saying that, but I'm so excited. And then this is our last question from Jennings, but could you speak to the duality of existing in the modern world and knowing super deep spiritual truths that come with psychedelics and inner work, and how do you balance those?
It's a great question. Existence is all about balance anyway. And I think that the modern world's benefits are the technologies and the tools that we have available to us. And what isn't of great benefit is the propaganda and the control systems and the things that we find to be difficult, right? So we need to look deep within ourselves to what we want to emphasize. And I think we can exclude what's not really supportive of us. So we don't have to pay so much attention to the things that we find difficult from the modern world, from these deep truths that we find inside our experiences. And rather, we need to bring the deep truths that we find inside our experiences and apply those to how we approach ourselves in the modern world. Often the psychedelic experience looks like an other. It looks like, oh, that's what's really true, and over here it's not. It's like, no, in this world, in this modern world, we really have built this. We really create this. We really sustain it. In many cases, we really have to, through economic reasons, personal reasons, family reasons, societal reasons. Like, we really have to engage this, and we need all the help from what we learn inside the psychedelic experiences to help us do it better, to help us do it with more grace and more efficiency, and ultimately more success. And then I think together in that, we can create intention of how we can implement change to make that system not only better for ourselves, but for everybody.
Yeah. Well said. Sometimes I struggle with that myself, of like, in the medicine space is so beautiful and feels so true, and then to come back to this, and it's like, how do you walk? But you have to learn to protect yourself and rise.
Yeah, and use psychedelics in a way to be truly positive. I think positive is also supportive of what we've created. And I think it's really easy to have an antagonistic attitude towards the things we don't like about modern society, but there's also lots of things that we benefit from. And so we can't, just take the good and throw out the bad. We have to accept that there's a lot of flaws, and it grew very, very, very quickly. So this thing that we call modern society, or the Western world, is a massive creation over a very short period of time. Think when the electric light bulb was invented. Okay, the day before that, from outer space, if you took those outer space shots of Earth, you would not see any light. And in less than a few hundred years, now you see the entire globe completely surrounded at night, where you can even make out the shape of the continents, and you can make out really specific shapes of the cities. And we built that as a collective, as a species of this planet. in less than 200 years.
Wild.
It's incredible how fast we've created. So we have to understand that this is something that's very, very new. And what's really beautiful about democratic societies is that we can use our collective decision-making to be able to guide it as we wake up in a better way. And we want that to be pro-society. We want it to be good for everybody. We want it to be pro-success. And ultimately, I think these systems will evolve into something better, but that requires us to do something about it. And that's what democracy really stands for. And I think that that's something very, very powerful. And the source of creativity can come from these very open, very extended experiences. And then we have to ground back in reality that this is something that we deal with on a daily basis and start to work together to be able to make change.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I just really want to deeply honor you. Every time I spend more time with you, I'm just so incredibly blown away by the human that you are. To call you human feels like a disservice to who you are and your energy, but you just blow my mind at the ability to hold space for every single person in the room at the same time. And I can even feel you, like my crazy experience on the fourth night, I could feel you off in the room helping someone else and also sending energy to me at the same time. And, you know, I got to watch you explain how to use a shakapa and the way that you can actually send out energy to multiple people in the room at the same time. I presume other shamans and maestros do that as well, but to witness it in you just are the most phenomenal conductor of that room that I've ever experienced. And I am so grateful to have found you and to continue coming back.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure. I absolutely find it to be a tremendous honor to get to do that for people with ceremony and share in that. And it is something that we learn how to do collectively. And I really look forward to continuing sharing our wisdom and knowledge as, you know, we continue to grow. And I can't wait to be able to invite more people to join us in the Academy and for us to all get to learn these things together.
It's going to be a great time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and review this podcast wherever you're listening. I'm so grateful to have you on this journey with me. Until next time.